I want to introduce to you a gentleman who is probably, in my experience, one of the most gentle men I've ever met. He is also one of the most driven and strong men I've ever met. He has a spiritual core of steel, if that's possible. An amazing man. Some things that you may not know about him is this man teaches dog agility. He has several national champions, dogs he's adopted and trained without ever actually touching the dog. He's an amazing man. This is the kind of power he has. He's also the best diver the world has ever seen.
And here he is, Greg Louganis. What an athlete! Greg Louganis is your gold medal winner.
The greatest diver ever.
Yes! What a dive! Greg Louganis.
Perhaps the most high-pressure dive in history.
Perfectly executed. 700! Number one, Greg Louganis, United States.
At age 16, he was an Olympic phenom in Montreal, winning a silver medal.
Greg Louganis is considered to be the greatest diver who ever lived. Top diving coaches say there will never be another one like him. He's won an incredible 47 national titles, 5 world championships, and 5 Olympic diving medals, winning consecutive double gold medals in 1984 and 1988. An unprecedented achievement.
He would attempt to become only the third diver in Olympic history to win both the springboard and platform events.
By 1984, Greg Louganis was in the best shape of his life, ready to compete and hungry for the gold. Louganis fulfilled expectations. He won the gold medal on the 3-meter springboard and then went on to win another gold in platform diving.
He did it! Greg Louganis is your gold medal winner in great style.
By 1988, things were looking up for Louganis as he eagerly anticipated the 1988 Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea. He was poised to sweep the diving events and win 2 more gold medals. Louganis stole the hearts of the world when he hit his head on the 3-meter springboard. Louganis got right back up on the 3-meter springboard and qualified for the finals.
Yes! What an athlete!
And then the very next day, to everyone's astonishment and joy, won the gold medal.
Yes! What a dive!
To win, he needed near-perfect scores on the most difficult dive in Olympic competition, a reverse 3.5.
Be featured on the Wheaties box cover.
It's such an incredible honor. They started this Legends campaign.
I feel like I'm being embraced as a whole person. I came out in '95 about my sexual identity, my HIV status. You know, I really come into my own and out to the real world.
It was just amazing, just a groundswelling of love.
To be here today is so incredible. God, I'm 56 and I'm a part of a body issue. You know, I never dreamed of that.
Greg Louganis. Okay. Welcome aboard, Greg.
Thanks.
Welcome to all the behind the scenes you could ever want. Let's see. So Greg and I are just going to have a quick conversation about some heavy stuff, but really the theory behind the whole elephants in the room is to create a comfortable environment to discuss uncomfortable things and thereby make them, as becoming known, comfortable. So that's the deal. Yeah. So this story, if you would just talk a little bit about, because a lot of people, when it showed up, the Wheaties box was a big deal for you next gen guys. Back in the day,
it was iconic. It was iconic, to be on the Wheaties box. And
go ahead.
So, anyways, with Eric Marcus, my co-author, we wrote Breaking the Surface, my autobiography. We spent 5 weeks at New York Times bestseller. And I would be going on tour, for the book signing, and people would be bringing me Wheaties boxes with my picture on it, and I'd sign it and not think anything of it. It wasn't until I was doing, we were working on Back on Board, my documentary, with Cheryl Fragenic, and we went to the International Swimming Hall of Fame. And so we go down this aisle at the International Swimming Hall of Fame in Fort Lauderdale, and there's all of these Wheaties boxes of some really well-known athletes and some rather obscure athletes. And I never got a Wheaties box.
Because what you're saying is they made their own. The people that brought
The
them.
people that brought them, they pasted my picture on the Wheaties box. Okay, so because that was something that we covered in the book, that a reporter, said, that basically they reached out to Wheaties and asked why I wasn't on a Wheaties box, and their response back in the late 80s was that I didn't share the same family values that they shared, because it was rumored that I was gay. And so it was quite a big deal, and it was interesting because this was brought back to it on Back on Board, and then Julie Sonderath, who I had never met in my life, wrote this petition to get me on the Wheaties box, and it just went viral. It went crazy. We had, I think, 48,000 signatures on that, and I finally got my Wheaties box.
So let's talk just a little bit before we get to the other stuff about two things. One, about having to be delicate with your sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because back in the day, I was out. I was out to my friends and family. It was just my policy not to discuss my sexual identity, my personal life with members of the media. And at that time, the members of the media actually respected that. There was plenty to read between the lines. My girlfriend was my dog, Great Dane, Miley. There were just a lot of things that pointed to it, but they respected that. It was an issue when we travel internationally for diving. It's usually a very small team. And so there were meetings that were being held while I wasn't invited to those meetings, but to figure out who was going to room with the fag. And there was usually, I usually qualified for 2 spots, so oftentimes I would get my own room, or I would room with a coach, or there was usually one individual that was comfortable enough with their own, confident enough with their own sexual identity that it was no big deal. And anyways, my thought was, you should be so lucky. Anyway, not attracted at all. So it was, it was challenging. I kind of came out in college, which is kind of typical. And then after the '84 Olympic Games, I signed on with the William Morris Agency, and they said, well, we want you to tone down the gay thing. So then it's back in the closet again, right? So it's been a really interesting ride. And there's many closets, as we all know. And it's, and you're coming out all the time. I even caught my husband. We were shopping at this, at the Westfield Mall, and he was talking to a vendor, and we were married. And
I go up and he's checking things out. I'm looking at shiny objects, and so then I joined him, and he said, "Oh, this is my friend,
Whoa.
Greg." And I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "I'm his husband." So it's interesting, that how we talk to other people, and just being honest, open, and forthright. How there's a certain amount of respect that comes from that. And it's like, oh wow, oh that's cool. But it also opens up the door, for them to kind of open up their minds and hearts.
Well, actually, and so speaking of respect for you and the way you train and the way you live your life, I'm sketchy on the details, but you were invited back sort of into the diving fold with London, correct? To coach, essentially, I would say spiritually.
By a foreigner.
Would you talk about that?
Well, it was Steve Foley from Australia. He was hired on as high performance director for USA Diving. I hadn't really been involved in USA Diving since I had retired. I would go, to an Olympic trials or, a few events here and there that I could make. But he reached out to me, and I thought it was just a casual visit. And he said, "Well, how do we get you back into diving?" And I said, "Ask." And he said, "You've never been asked?" I said, "No, nor have I felt welcome." And so he said, "Well, I can't do anything about the past, so I can only focus on the future." And so he asked me we tried to figure out what would be the best position for me, and that was mentoring. Mentoring the young divers, because when I first met with the divers, they were all excited. They made the Olympic team, and or before they made the Olympic team, I would say, "What's your ultimate diving goal?" And they'd say, "Make the Olympic team." And I said, "And then what?" And then they'd look at me like with these puzzled looks, like, "Make the Olympic team." And I said, "Well, don't you want to get on the podium? Don't you want to bring something home? Don't you want to win?" And they weren't, that wasn't their mindset. I mean, we won one medal in 2000. Fortunately, it was gold. Laura Wilkinson, Olympic gold medalist in women's platform. And then they added synchronized diving. So you have 4 more events. So you're adding 4 more events. 2004. 0 medals in diving. 2008, 0 medals in diving. And those kids were showing up. What I saw from a distance, because I wasn't there, wasn't invited. What I observed was these kids were like deers caught in the headlights. They were just not prepared. And so then when I talked to the kids that I was working with in preparation for London, I said, "Okay, you have to devote a minimum of 20% of your training as training as if you are at the Olympic Games. Setting up the situations. Okay, the Chinese are ahead by 12 points. I need 9s on this dive. Visualize, and we talked about, and I teach visualization. So I teach relaxation and visualization. So I teach that as well with the kids that I work with in all sports, and ballroom dancing. I had a ballroom dancer, competitive. And so, I told them, I said, okay, fill the stands with people. Know where the cameras are going to be. Put yourself in that situation. And, and then, because the more we get good at what we practice, if this is what we practice and how we practice, then we're going to have a better opportunity to be successful.
And it worked.
And it worked. Well, we got 4 medals in 2012. Silver women's 3-meter springboard synchro, bronze in the men's 10-meter platform synchro. We got another bronze in another event, and then a gold. David Budaya won the gold medal on 10-meter platform.
Cool. Okay, well,
and I think we got 3 at the last Olympics. Gold, bronze, I think.
I think
No, silver, bronze.
To put words in your mouth, but my sense is what you gave these kids was a spiritual core, a meditation tool that I think had when you were diving, set you apart from the competition, the more clinically based Chinese.
Right.
But to put the heart back into it.
Yeah. Well, I was taught visualization. I started dancing when I was doing acrobatics when I was a year and a half, performing on stage when I was 3. 3-year-old can get away with anything, right? You know, so I did the little tap number, and my teacher is following me around with this microphone with this, long stick attached to it, so people could hear me. So, what happened prior to that performance was, okay, I got a costume. I had a top hat and a cane and, all this. So there was new choreography. And so my instructor, I think out of frustration, because I was only 3 years old, said, okay, I'm going to play the music, do the routine, left the room. I said, okay. And the way that I interpreted it is, okay, imagine myself doing the routine and do it fluid. So it took 4 times, and a 3-year-old, has a 3-year-old has a very active imagination. So, it took 4 times before it was fluid. And then, I told her that, I did it fluid. Then she turned the tempo up to make it faster. And so then I visualized it, and it was still fluid. Because she knew at 3 years old, it was the day of the recital, and if I did the routine over and over and over again, my muscles would be so fatigued I wouldn't be able to perform that night. So that's how I learned visualization. And as a 3-year-old, you don't think that your perception doesn't go much beyond yourself. So you think that everybody knows this. So I just assumed this is what everybody does. And I didn't think that it was any extraordinary tool until much later, when the sports psychologists started coming around the pool in the late 70s and said, have you tried mental imagery or visualization? I'm like going, duh. It's like, doesn't everybody? So
let's talk about HIV.
Yeah.
And that closet, because that is still a huge closet. And
it is. I mean, and it's it's something that people don't like to talk about. But I'll share on Instagram. I'll take a picture. Once a month. Okay, I got all my pills set up. I've got my what I have to take and all that stuff. But that was difficult. I was diagnosed HIV positive 6 months prior to the Olympic Games in Seoul, Korea. And when I was at the Olympic trials, it was really scary, because before the Olympic trials started, there was a bug going around, a flu virus, and I got it bad. I mean, I wasn't on the boards for 2-3 days. I was just too sick. And then I got back on the boards the day before the Olympic trials started. And fortunately I was able to be successful. I won the Olympic trials, both 3-meter springboard and 10-meter platform. But that scared me, because at that time we thought of HIV as a death sentence, because people were dying right and left. My T-cell count was under 200. And so, it was frightening. And I went to my coach, who initially I didn't want to tell because I knew that going into '88, the Chinese had caught up to me, and so I knew that I had to be in the best shape possible, and I was afraid that had he known that I had a compromised immune system, then he would take it easy on me, and I had to be in the best shape that I possibly could. It just got to be too much of a secret that, you know, he finally pulled me into his office and said, okay, what's going on? And, you know, I told Ron, you know, that I tested positive for HIV and I have a compromised immune system. He says, okay, I don't know what that means, but, you know, we'll get through this together. And I told him, I said, you know, I didn't want to tell you because I thought you'd take it easy on me. And he said, I'm not going to get you off the hook that easy. So I knew I was in good hands. And I also could not, come out about my HIV status at that time because I would not have been allowed into the country of Seoul, Korea. So my doctor who was treating me, who was also my cousin, he was in constant contact with the Olympic Training Center to make sure that any of the medications that I was on would not be any of the banned substances. And actually, quite to the contrary, AZT is not a performance-enhancing drug. Quite the opposite. It's quite toxic. So, yeah, it was a journey. And it was interesting because I was doing a play in New York in 1993, and Jeffrey, you know, about gay dating in the 90s. And I played Darius, and I was able to live out my fantasy of being out and proud and gay pride marches and on TV and in the chorus of Cats. And so, you know, I was able to play out my fantasies, but I also was able to face my fears too, because he dies in the play. Mm-hmm. And his spirit comes back and delivers what I felt was the most poignant message to the lead character, Jeffrey, and telling Jeffrey to hate AIDS, not life. And so that really was the catalyst for me to reach out to a friend of mine, Robbie Brown, who introduced me to Eric Marcus, and that's how Breaking the Surface kind of happened. One thing that I learned years later was that we were picked up by Random House, you know, after our submission, and they had Eric sign an agreement that the book would be on the shelves within 1 year. You know, which he said most of the times it takes, you know, 3 to 4 years to finish an autobiography, because they were afraid that I might get sick or I might die. So, but we got the book out and I'm still here.
And we're glad. So pertinent to this, actually, and just a point of discussion, most of you know this because you're close to a lot of creative people and there are probably a few gay people in the room. HIV is not AIDS. You can have HIV and not have AIDS. So that's just a fact to share. I'm going to go into some personal anecdote and some data here before the end of our time. I know the last time I flew to Shanghai, on the little boarding card when you're landing in China, it actually says, do you have HIV? I'm like, I'm not answering that. I'll be on the next plane out. And people don't notice these things. And I don't know if that's still there, but as you know, when I published an article about a year ago, actually April, a year ago, about working in the UAE and being HIV positive, which is something I thought I could do / fly under the radar / get away with. I love Dubai. I love working over there. There's so much opportunity and so much vision and so much frustration, which is a good lesson. But it is against the law you cannot get a resident permit in the UAE and be HIV positive. And when they find out you have HIV, when they test you, when they get that result, you go to the airport that day. There's no bureaucratic procedure. You're gone and you're banned for life. So that became a little bit of pressure for me. I went over there working for an American company. We were on tourist visas, which is actually, they don't like that so much anymore, but we could get away with it. And when it was over, I thought, I would stick around and freelance. But here's what happened. I mean, here's the questions you go under. What if I get in a car wreck? What if I cut my finger? Every day.
What if you hit your head on the board?
Yeah, what if you get on the board? And for instance, I talk about personal and business relationships. I was offered a job when my company's contract wrapped up with Morass. I was offered creative director at MotionGate. I said I wanted to continue as a consultant. I would have taken the job, but if I'd taken the job, I would have been deported. So I lied. And I ended up living with that lie for the next 2 years. I would work for agencies. I would do a couple of freelance projects. They'd offer me their creative director, executive job. I'd say, well, I want to be a freelancer. And that's the last I'd work for that company, because I think anywhere in the world, somebody offers you a job, you say no, there's something happens dynamically. In Arabia, you're offending people. And so, no, I didn't, and then interestingly enough, I went back last year writing a plan for the entertainment for Expo 2020, and they offered me executive creative director job at Expo 2020. I would love this job, but I can't take it as a consultant. When I got back what prompted this was I got back from Dubai, I was exhausted. It just was so much pressure, and I thought, I'm going home to San Francisco and try to rebuild my business there. And as soon as I get back, I get a call from another company doing a project in Kuala Lumpur, big theme park, dream job for me. And the trouble is, the laws there are very similar to what they are in the UAE and in China. They're a little more lenient, but I said to the executive, I said, well, let me just tell you where I am on this. And I came out to him. I had nothing to lose, and I told him I have HIV, and it's illegal, and it's illegal there. And the cool thing is, his first response was, well, how can we make this work? Of course, every great idea he came up with is illegal. Yeah. But he wanted me there, so that felt great, and all I have is the information. So, for instance, had I wanted to keep that job, I would have to have 2 insurance policies, one in the US and one there, so I could get my meds here. And then getting my meds to me, the only way for me to get them is to come home and get them and bring them back. He suggested that they put them in their courier, or somebody comes from the office. Well, of course, anybody caught carrying HIV drugs that don't belong to them, it's a federal offense, and it's against the law in that country. It was just, finally I just said, I appreciate it, but I can't take this job. It's just not going to work. I want the job, but I can't take it. So what I thought was most interesting in all of this was, these are the countries, I can give this information to you later. All these countries are countries that may let you in as a tourist, they won't let you live there. And as this says, some restrict work permits, some have laws against transporting retrovirals, virtually all reject HIV positive people, whether you're a professional or a laborer. Pretty much all of them reject laborers, which is another conversation about human rights for another elephant in the room. But when I published this last April, I got a call from one member of TEA, and I say that I think the reason I didn't hear from a lot of my friends is because they were so uncomfortable with the fact. I totally get that, which is what started this conversation. But what I did hear from, I just want to make sure I covered the things right. I've already talked about these things. But what was significant was I got, and this is just anecdotal, 15 emails from employees of people, members of TEA, in the exact same situation I was in, but actually working in China, Malaysia, in the UAE, people that just happen to read my blog. I mean, this is not scientific data, but 15 people wrote me and said, oh man, I hope you could do something about this because this is awful. So I just shared the information. We just shared the information. These laws were written when Edward was terrified in the 80s. In fact, Joe Kleinman just published a great sort of pre-review of this conversation. And he was talking about when he was in grade school, they told him you could get it by spitting or from toilet seats. and so they couldn't sit on the toilet seats at their grade school. Everybody was terrified, and that's when these laws were written. Things are different now, and you actually, I cannot transmit the virus. I'm HIV positive. I'm undetectable. I'm on medication. My partner is HIV negative. There's no danger to him. And this is new science, but it's globally embraced. The National Alliance of State and Territorial AIDS Directors, this is just good information. I'm just sharing this with you so you have it. But here is the statement that the NASTAD has issued, but now it's been embraced by this many national and local and civic AIDS organizations worldwide. It's great news that I can't give my partner the virus, that I am not dangerous. So, well, not with that. So the conversation is, I wanted to share the pressure that someone like Greg had to undergo, yet still ends up winning, which is something to which I think I certainly aspire. But just as some of the things we talked about last year, having the conversation so that you know the next time you have dinner with somebody in some country where you're negotiating a contract or this and that, talk to your HR departments. The world is evolving, and if you can help evolve it, I think that would be great. You have any questions? Questions of Greg, of me? It's a short conversation. Do you have any questions? I really appreciate you sitting through this. I'm so thankful to Greg for coming and
there are questions.
Logistics are kicking in.
Carl, back here. Okay.
Hi, it's for Greg, Paul Ostrout, Universal Creative. Greg, I'm interested in world-class athletes after they retire from competition. Do you still dive? When was the last time you were on a 10-meter platform?
Oh my God, I did the ESPN body issue. If you're familiar with that, you're doing your sport naked. So, and they approached me last year. Thank God they gave me like 8 months to prepare. It was just like, okay, if you give me enough advance notice. But it's interesting. I think I'm the oldest. I was 56, 57 now. I think that I'm the oldest that they've ever asked to be a part of the ESPN's body issue, and I felt like I was doing it for all the right reasons. Number one, I was 56. I have friends who are just turning 40 who are not quite as active as I am, and also I've been living with HIV for probably over 30 years. Because I was diagnosed in '88, and I don't know how long prior to that I was positive. Because my prior partners had later passed. So who knows how long I've been infected with HIV. And that's the other thing. My husband's HIV negative. I'm HIV positive. I'm stable as far as my T cell count and viral load undetectable. So I can't transmit, the virus. And he gets tested regularly, just being responsible. So that can work. I mean, it's initially it was an inhibitor for me mentally, that I would only date an HIV positive man. And also when you first get the diagnosis, like, oh my God, who will ever touch me again? So, it's, you go through a lot. You go through a lot of transitions, living with HIV, and I guess I've lived with it long enough, to kind of been through the gambit.
Kyle?
Yep, yes?
Pat McKay. Most of us in this room know that you have been crusading on this issue of hiding in plain sight in Dubai and other places for quite a number of years. And I am astonished at the amount of material you've managed to collect on it. But isn't there something more aggressive and activist you are encouraging our community to come together and do than just be aware?
Well, thank you, and thank you for asking that. Truly, but it's no secret that I have my causes, and that was actually when Steve walked up to me at IAPA 2.5 years ago and said, I think maybe we're ready to talk about some of these things you want to talk about. And I said, only if you do it with me. The purpose of this is just to share the information. This is not a call to action. Everybody's different, politics, how you believe. I respect all of that. I just want to share the information so that you are informed and hopefully inspire. Yes, I think it'd be great if the TEA took some global act, but there are politics involved, and that's not what I'm recommending. I just want everybody informed and to know so that when it comes up, you go, that's actually not true. Here's the story. That's the seed I want to plant. Does that make sense?
Just being informed.
Anything else?
Greg, all of us have a closet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think each of us in this room can relate. Self-confessional, mine happens to be religion, and wanting to change a religion at the expense of family support, love, and the conditions that if you do, you lose.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a tremendous emotional taxing that takes place. And what advice would you give, whether it's our own private closets, political, religious, familiar, whatever it may be? What advice? How did you get through the judgment, the stressfulness, the rejection? What tools could you give us that would help us?
It's interesting because my pendant has a great significance. It's my mom's diamond, my dad's diamond, and my dad's birthstone. Because I had the most healing to do with my dad. I took care of him the last 6 weeks of his life. He died of cancer in '91. He was pretty tough on me, growing up, and even when he got sick, he was still trying to set me up with the nurses. After, it's like, oh, isn't she pretty? It's like, Dad, come on. It's not a 30-year phase, I had a lot of healing with it, and where the design comes from is we try to find our truth. And when we trying to find our truth, then we go through this veil of judgment. And then we put labels on ourselves, good, bad, ugly, short, tall, whatever, religion. So you go through those labels. But then in my meditation, when you work from the outside in, that veil of judgment really transform into forgiveness. So then when you go through that veil of forgiveness, all that's left in the center is love. Simple as that. I don't know, does that help?
If all you're left with is love, that helps.
Yeah.
Another one?
Yeah, I have a diving question.
Okay.
I'm Glenn Morris with Hewitt Sellers. I'm an architect. My son's on dive team, and he's recently been overwhelmed with fear.
Right.
He got hurt. And what do you do? Like, what could I say to him to help him overcome the fear?
It's funny. Okay, J.K. Rowling's, came up. So I'm a huge Harry Potter fan.
Didn't you name several dogs after?
Yeah, I have a Dobby. I had a Gryffindor. And so anyways, Prisoner of Azkaban. This is what I tell my kids too, because all of the kids that I work with have at one time or another dealt with fear, had to deal with fear. Either they smacked or they hit the board or, for whatever reason. I I asked the kids at a certain period of time when Harry Potter was really popular. I said, "Okay, Prisoner of Azkaban. What is a Bogart?" And they'd say, and a Bogart is something that transforms into your greatest fear. Okay, how do you transform a Bogart? The spell is ridiculous. So you turn it into something really ridiculous. And how do you banish a Bogart? You laugh at it. So this is how I teach my kids, is that I work with in dealing with fear, is I would imagine because I would be afraid of smacking on a dive, and so I would make it so bad I smack really, really hard in my imagination, in my visualization, and then I'd smack so hard I'd bounce off the water, and then I'd smack so hard I'd bounce off the water back on the board. I mean, something so ridiculous that, and start doing tricks out of it, and so ridiculous that, it's never going to happen, but you can laugh at it. When you laugh at it, it takes the power out of that fear. So if you can take the power out of that fear, then it diminishes the fear, to have the courage to push through.
I think we have time for one more question. Do we have another question? I have bad eyesight, so I can't see. Oh, here's one.
First of all, this has just been absolutely compelling. And thank you both very much for it. This is a question that was referenced at the very beginning. How do you train a dog without touching it?
I do touch them. I mean, I show them affection. I pet them. All of that. Oftentimes, it is okay. You ignore the bad behavior, reward the good behavior, so that the good behavior becomes repeated more frequently than not, and oftentimes will extinguish the bad behavior. It's purely positive training, positive reinforcement. Also, you have to, in training, you have to get the dog's desire up, or their drive, as they call it in dog training, so that they can be challenged. They have that desire, and that they can be challenged and still be successful. So oftentimes, especially, I'm working with a puppy right now. I've only had her for, I think, 4 to 6 weeks. And oftentimes she's confused. What do I want from her? So I wait. When she gives me the right response, that's rewarded. And it's rewarded big. It's like, oh, that's what you wanted. Okay, I get it. So then it becomes a game. Work is play and play is work. So that is how I train. I
didn't mean to say he didn't touch them. He doesn't strike them. He definitely gives them affection.
I'll strike the owners.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.